Hey folks, this is Paul talking about A Course in Miracles on Saturday. So the big question is, what is oneness? Can we even describe it? Can we explain it? Can we understand it? Is A Course in Miracles a teaching in oneness? Is it teaching the same thing as other things that teach about oneness? What do we even mean by being one with something, or is it really true that God is just this one something and there is nothing else? Now, there are two major views of A Course in Miracles and what it says, based on different ways of thinking. And one of these ways is almost completely, almost everybody thinks this way and doesn't realize there's an alternative. And there's another way to think about many of the Course's topics that is very different. It's very outside the box, and it's very, when you first start to try to do it, it seems a bit difficult and it seems a bit hard to get your head around. So some people will say, well, you can't get your head around it. It's not possible to explain God. You can't possibly describe oneness. You can't be in a position where you can know what it's like. But you actually can use words. You can use logic. You can use reasoning. And you can say a lot of things that are very, very true. You can say things about God that are true. You can say God is love. Well, that is 100% accurate. You can say God is peaceful. That is 100% accurate. So the words that we've used to symbolize what God is like can be very, very precise, and they can accurately represent the nature of reality. The words themselves aren't the reality, they're not the experience of the reality, but as symbols, symbols can be very accurate, and it's useful sometimes to have accurate symbols. Now, I don't even know where to begin with this, because there's just a huge amount of confusion about what oneness is in A Course in Miracles. And it's mainly because we're so used to using the current way that we think about everything. We've been doing it our whole lives. We've learned it from our environment. It seems to work well in the world. And nobody's questioning it. It's just sort of an assume this is how you think, this is how you reason things out, this is how you make sense of stuff. And whatever makes sense to you is what you are going to accept. If it seems to make sense and it seems valid, it seems true, you can't see any reason why not, you can't see any contradictions, you're going to say, yeah, okay, that makes sense, I can accept that, because you can understand it, you can, whatever way you're looking at it, if you've made it make sense, you don't see any sign of anything, any red flags or anything saying otherwise, so you're like, well, that seems to be the whole truth then. But it's possible, and people don't realize it's possible that something can make sense and not be true, because you can have you can have a false premise. You could have start out with an assumption of a truth that you believe is true, and you can deduce and derive various things from that, all of which can be completely internally consistent. They all seem to sort of support each other. There doesn't seem to be any contradictions within the confines of this context of how you're thinking based on this starting premise. And you can draw conclusions that seem to completely be supportive and in line with the way that you started this whole line of thinking, but it's still possible that even though all of that seems to make sense within that picture, the whole thing is wrong. It's still possible for you to have extraordinary amounts of internal consistency where the things that you believe all seem to support each other. The things that you believe are all consistent, and they don't seem to contradict, and they all seem to be part of one big system, and it all seems to gel together perfectly and all sort of mirror each other, and every conclusion you come to seems to support all of the rest of it, and you get this sort of building up of strength and belief and conviction that the stuff that you've decided is true is without question, and the whole thing seems to just fit together, and it all seems to just work out, and it makes a nice clean picture. And yet, at the same time, the whole thing can be false. And this is a question of whether the reasoning is sound, whether the outcomes and the premise are even valid. And you can start off on the wrong foot and come to all kinds of wrong conclusions without realizing you started on the wrong foot. And all those conclusions can seem true, and you can believe them and be convinced that you've found the answer. You can be very, very, very wrong. If your whole entire collection of supporting beliefs and arguments are all based on a lie, or based on something that isn't actually true. That's why the entire ego thought system is based on a lie. It's based on the suggestion that you're separate from God. And that becomes a starting point on which to base all kinds of other conclusions. I am separate, and therefore these objects are separate, and therefore I'm in a separate body, and therefore I have separate beliefs and separate thoughts, and all of that seems to sort of be normal or make sense. It's part of a whole system. And you can think this is normal in reality, but based on the fact that you're not separate from God, the entire thing is false. So you can actually build up a case that seems to be in support of a viewpoint, flesh it out in great detail, and draw conclusions from it, and base things on it, and base more conclusions on those conclusions, and create a whole picture, and be completely full of crap. So there's one very, very prevalent system of thought which the whole world has adopted, and very few people have questioned it. It's a system based on separation, which right off the bat tells you that we're assuming that there is a separation, that separation is possible. And that is forming a whole mindset, a whole system of thinking based on this premise of separation. And so what that leads to is this sort of experience of the world where you see everything as separate. So you have your separate car, and your separate house, and your separate dog, and your separate cat. And all the forms of the object seem to be separate and in different separate places at different times. And if you'll notice, there is never an object occupying the same space as another object at the same time. Everything is kept apart. in space-time. Space-time is based on separateness. So everything in this universe, all the galaxies, planets, cities, people, whatever, is all fundamentally rooted in an idea of being separate. So the whole thing is laid out in a separate way, which means basically nothing shares anything with anything else. I'm sitting here and I'm not sharing this chair with you. And the car is parked in the garage and it's not parked in your garage. And this apartment is not your apartment, and the weather outside is different to the weather outside of where you are. And all of these things are isolated from each other, excluding each other, to the extent that we can even say in subatomic physics that a particle, let's say, cannot share its existence with another particle. If you try to merge them together, make them overlap, have them share exactly the same space, you're going to have some kind of nuclear explosion or something, because it's forced apart. Everything in this whole universe is kept apart by what we call atomic forces, but really they are the force of the idea of separation, keeping everything separated off. Keeping our bodies separate, keeping our buildings separate, keeping the molecules separate. Every single thing around you that you've ever seen and touched in your whole life is separated. So then, as you've grown up in a separated world, it seems normal and natural and common. The sort of the built-in language of space-time is to speak in terms of separate things. This comes before that and leads to this. So you have this idea of cause and effect, and those things are over there and these things are over here. So you start thinking this way. You start having thoughts based on a model of reality that's rooted in separateness. What that produces is separate boxes. I have a little do a little diagram for you on my piece of paper. So we have the world, and then we start breaking it up into separate boxes, and we start putting things in boxes and saying, okay, here's an apple, and here's a banana, and here's a pear, here's some grapes. Okay, so you've got different things in different boxes, and then you start saying the pear is here and it's not over here, and the apple is not over there, and here's a box full of grapes. The pear is not in the box of grapes, it's in its own separate box, and the banana is not in the same box with the apple. So we tend to start just dividing up everything, separating everything out and throwing it in a nice little compartment. And you might notice that these compartments are extremely exclusive. They do not allow there to be any sharing of the boxes. You're not allowed to put the grapes in with the pears or the bananas, okay, because if they overlap, you cannot overlap objects. You cannot have this space is the same as this space. They are kept apart. So in space-time, the whole entire system, which is a system of thought, space-time is an order of reality in the mind. is a system of thinking based on separateness. The fundamental rule that cannot be broken and must always apply is exclusion requires that everything be kept apart by a wall. You can't have two people on the same side of the wall. Everything has to be separated out and kept away from each other. That's the fundamental law of this world. Okay, so then we start thinking this way. Okay, we start to think, that's my car, that's your car, this is my body, that's your body. My body is not your body. Either I'm at work, or I'm at home, or I'm at the grocery store. I'm not in all three places at once. Okay, so we get this rule that either something is over there or it's over here. Either it's mine or it's yours. Either it's a grape or it's a pear. Either it's a banana or an apple. It is never possible that anything is more than one thing. And everything has to be exclusively, specifically isolated and kept away from everything else. This is the whole system of this world. Either this or that. Either you're on this side of the wall or you're on this side of the wall. You cannot cross in the middle of the wall. The walls of separation keep everything apart. This is fundamental to space itself. Even if you had no objects, space-time is a system of exclusion that forces everything to be separated out and to not share the same space. So space is really the idea of what is over here is not over here. Either it's over there or it's over here, but it's not in both places. Nothing can be everywhere, which is an assertion of the idea that everything cannot be anywhere. God is nowhere. This idea of separation is an attack on God. It is an attempt to assert, space-time is an attempt to assert God does not exist anywhere, because there's nowhere that you can find where everything is in one place. There's nowhere where the whole of God can be found. And therefore, the whole of God cannot be found anywhere, so God doesn't exist. That is why this thought alone, either this or that, separately. Another way to say this is, I just realized my words are back to front. Shit, how am I supposed to write backwards? What, you think this is some kind of... I have no idea how to write that backwards. Hold on. Let's do this. Yeah, how's that? Either or. Another way to say either or is not. This is not that. This is not over there. I am not you. This body is not your body. My car is not your car. All of space and time is the idea of not God. It is the opposite of God's reality. Not God. Let me do this. Not God. This is a logic thing. This is the separation from God was simply nothing other than the assertion of the total opposite of God. When you totally oppose something, you're saying it's an exclusive or. You're saying not this, entirely not this, completely not like God. Space and time, everything in space and time, all separate objects are based on not reality, not God, not love, not joining, not sharing, not transcending boundaries, not being in multiple places at once, this not being this, the person not being the other person, the body not being the other body. And we start thinking this way in this thought system about the world and about everything we see. So just about everybody on the planet thinks in terms of either this or that. Not this, not that. This isn't that. That's different to this. So now you get differences and you get inequality. My car is not my house, and my body is different to your body, because they're not the same. They're not one. They do not share anything. So my apple is not the same as my pear, and my banana is a different shape to my grapes, because they are not the same. So you have divisions, and then because you have divisions, you have differences. You have to have differences in order to have a separation. So now you get a whole universe of differences, divided up, differentiated, separated off, separated out, kept apart, excluded, made to be a symbol of not God, an attack on God, to fulfill the notion of thinking about everything this way. Either this is true or it's not. Either this is true or that's true. Now, this has led to a lot of bullshit. So now, when you're thinking about anything, any subject, including spiritual topics, including God, including the nature of reality, including what God is like and what God can create and what exists in reality and what oneness means, you always are thinking within this model. Even when you're thinking about oneness, even when you're drawing conclusions about the nature of reality, even when you're thinking about God or things that seem to be beyond the world, beyond your ability to think about them, allegedly, you're still in space and time using separation for all of your reasoning. All of it. So even if I'm using this to decide either I'm going to choose the apple pie or the cherry pie for my lunch, you're also thinking in this same way when you think about God. Either God is this or that. Either he has one son or two sons. Either there's oneness or there's separation. Either there's oneness or there's manyness. Either it's oneness or it's duality. Those might sound like fairly logical conclusions that seem to make sense to a lot of people. But they're bullshit, because the conclusion is being drawn on the basis of a system of thought that is rooted in separateness. So it's like we're using a faulty model which was designed to make you think wrongly about everything, an expression of ego that is totally based on separation, using the rules of separate thinking to think about things that are not separate and to draw conclusions about them using separateness to draw those conclusions. which is a total fail. Totally bullshit. So you might be thinking, okay, now here's the thing. Here's what happens when you try to use this kind of thought system to think about oneness. You get a bunch of boxes. Okay, 3 boxes. Within this is the system of ego thought based on separation. So you think box number 1. Wow, I guess that would be 3, 2, 1. My numbers are backwards. It looks like a 5. Just bear with me 1 second. I have to learn how to draw backwards. Microphone. Okay. This is the whole model of how everyone is thinking. Every A Course in Miracles student is thinking with this model. So what we do is we think this is duality. This is where, okay, there are many things, they're separate from each other. You can count them, there's 3 of them. And this is all within the model of separate boxes. So what people do is constantly do this. You'll say, I want to get rid of separation because separation is a bad thing. Separation is ego. There was a separation from God, and supposedly we're supposed to be undoing the separation and returning to something called oneness. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start trying to get rid of separations. I don't like this separation and I don't like this separation. So I'm going to get rid of this box. And I'm going to just get rid of this box. What have I done? Well, now I have 1 box left. And because it's a count of 1, you don't realize why this is funny, but because this is a count of 1, and you think, this is all there is. This is all that's left when you get rid of the separate boxes. You think that this is oneness. But this 1 box that's left over is still a fucking box within a model of separateness. We have not transcended the model. We have not gone outside of the rules of separateness, which is that when there are many things, they are separate. Everything is separate. This is still a separate box within a separate mindset, masquerading as a symbol of oneness. It does not accurately describe the nature of God's reality. God is not a fucking box. Just because there's a count of 1 and you've conveniently hidden the other boxes does not mean you have left the ego thought system. It does not mean you have leapt into reality. It does not mean that you have somehow understood what oneness means. All that you've done is you've stayed within the same system of thinking that you've had your entire life. You've decided to pretend that you're getting rid of separate things, that you've divided up your world, and get it down, prune it away, get it down to the simplest seeming, least divisible thing, so that you end up with this 1 box. And then you think, if I can even do this backwards, I hope that says God. Oh, it does, okay. So then you think this describes God. Get rid of all your separations, whittle it down to one box, a count of one. It's not divisible any further. It's just a one expansive box. This must surely be what God is like. This must be reality, because this is the simplest possible model that you can seem to come up with. And so there's nothing better. There's nothing better than an indivisible single unit. And so people think that this is a definition of reality, that this somehow accurately describes the nature of oneness. God is one big giant box, an infinite box, in which there is only God. There's one thing in the box, which, by the way, was the same thing that you said over here when there was one thing in a box. There's one thing in the box. There's only allowed to be one thing in the box. That's a rule of separateness. Okay? When you believe that the box can only contain one thing, that is a belief in separate boxes. That God can only have himself in the box and not share the box with anything else. That is a rule of the ego in space-time. It is bullshit. And this is not the teaching of A Course in Miracles. There's no difference between this and this. This is the same. This is all part of, this box is part of the same thing right here. It's all part of the system of boxes. Do I have, how many boxes do I have? Do I have 3 boxes? Do I have 1 box? Is there allowed to be anything more than one thing in the box? No, there's not. Things are kept separate. This is like a prison cell for God. This is like saying God can only be by himself. He is alone. He doesn't share with anyone. He doesn't have a son. He is never created. He is alone, separate, isolated, confined in this box, and never has he created anything. Ever. Not even one son, not even Christ. God is alone. That is what you end up with when you use the model of separation to try to think about God. And a lot of people are doing this. A lot of people are asserting that this is what oneness means. This is what A Course in Miracles is teaching, that when you undo the separations between things, you're going to end up with a single box. And that is going to be ultimate reality. And because it's so simple, there is nothing more accurate. It's so simple, so indivisible, such a simple unit, a single unit, that you can't get any better than that. That's the whole claim. That's the whole claim, is that it's you cannot see any way for there to be a better model of reality, and therefore you don't see any flaws in this because you don't see any separations, so there's no contradictions. So you think that this must be the ultimate definition of oneness. It must be true. But this entire definition of oneness is an ego conclusion. You're still locked inside a mindset that thinks in terms of separate boxes. Even if you're pretending there are no other boxes, you're still thinking of God as a box. You're still abiding in your mind by the rule that what is in one box is not allowed to be in another box. You're not allowed to have multiple boxes, and if God is in this box, he is not in any other boxes. That is a space-time rule. But that imposes upon God a limitation, and it says God cannot share himself. God is not allowed to create a sun. God cannot contain anything. God cannot host anything within himself. He can't even have any thoughts. In the strictest sense, God has to be a separate God. That is literally what this model produces: a separate, alone, single oneness that we're calling God, and it's all there is. And this is what most people think is the truth about reality, and what most people think A Course in Miracles is teaching about reality, and it's not. There is more to this, because the problem is this model, which includes the idea of oneness that most people think of. That idea of oneness is part of the system of separation. The rules that are a part of this system of separation do not apply to God, which means God is allowed to be in more than one place at a time. God is allowed to be in multiple places at once. All of God can be in this box, and all of God can be in this box at the same time. Your ego is going to say, that's not possible. This is going to say, that's not allowed. But this is a system of limitation based on separation. It is not based on God's reality. And so everything that comes from it is false. This system of separate boxes is not based on the truth. The truth is more like this. Whereas we had before backwards writing either or and not, we're basically saying in this box, God is not anywhere else. That is a limitation. God is either in this box or he isn't. That is a limitation. The opposite of this whole system of thinking and how everybody thinks about oneness, the opposite of either or and the opposite of not is the logical idea of and. Let's see if I can write that. Backwards and, let's see. Something like that. And another word that goes along with that is both. God is in this box and God is in this box. God is in both boxes. Therefore, God transcends the separation between the boxes. God's nature doesn't give a shit about the idea of separation or the idea of boxes or being confined. Nor does he give a shit about the idea that what is here cannot be shared with what is here, or what is in this box cannot share with what is in this box. It's not God's nature. God can be everywhere fully at the same time. This is not something that we're used to thinking about. This is very, very alien to how everybody's thinking. So, if we were to say God, all of God is in America, his entire being and all of his attention is in America, he's fully there. And yet, at the same time, all of God is in Europe. His entire attention is in Europe at the same time. All of him is over there, and all of him is over here. He is in both places at once, fully. This is a very alien idea to us, because what we're saying, we're not saying the left half of God is over there and the right half is over here. His arms and legs are over there and his torso and his head is over here. We're not separating God into two pieces and saying some of God is there and some of God is here. We're saying, this is the idea of omnipresence. All of God is over here, and at the same time, all of God is over here, and all of God is over there and over here. Which means you have to kind of envision this as this extraordinary interconnected network of mind and overlap and sharing, where even though God is fully here, God is also fully here. And there's not a single part of his attention that is lacking from both places at once, and nor is there a single limitation on his nature, not a single limit that requires that only some parts of God can be here while other parts can be here. It is possible for God to be entirely here and entirely over there simultaneously. So for him, his mind transcends boundaries, transcends space and time, transcends all notions of separateness and being kept apart. He is a gigantic blur that just, all of God is in all parts of God. There is literally a statement in the Course, I think, that says every part of God contains all of God. We're not used to this notion of a structure of reality that is transcendental of all thinking in terms of separate things. Either this or that is not compatible with this and that. You have to stay in separate boxes is not compatible with you can be in multiple boxes at once. God is a holographic system, because the holographic principle is that the whole is in every part, and every part contains the whole. And there can be many parts, and every part contains the whole. And the whole that it has is the same whole that the other parts have and that the whole has. This is the holographic principle. In A Course in Miracles, it literally says that the whole is in every part and every part is whole. And this is how God thinks. And that means all of God's mind and all of God's functioning and all of God's system, the system of reality, follows holographic principles because God is omnipresent. So all of God is in this part over here, all of God is in this part over here simultaneously, all of God is in me, all of God is in you, all of God is everywhere at once. This isn't the same thing as saying God is a great big blob that covers all existence, a space-time object that has some parts over here and a middle part and a side part and a bottom and a top, and it's very, very big and it covers everything, and therefore some parts are over here and some parts are over there, but it's so big that it covers everything. That's an ego separate box way of thinking about oneness that basically slaps a giant label on God and says, you are this big giant blob. And some of God's over there and some of God's over there, but the parts that are over here, you're generally not going to think that they're over there. Because you think in separate boxes. So now there's a huge difference between God is one big object versus God is a transcendence of space, whereby all of him is in every single part. That's totally different to this idea of this so-called oneness that everybody keeps harking on about, that God's just a big box and God's all there is in the box, and God doesn't share because sharing's not allowed. You can't have any sharing in order to have separate, nice, tidy boxes. You can't have things overflowing the box, and you can't have things in the box with God because that's not allowed. This is a projection of the ego onto God. I am an ego, I'm a separate box, I'm separate me, God is a separate fucking box, and he's also a separate box and a separate thing. Ego projection of God onto God, calling God a oneness, calling God a single thing. This is the ego's idea of God, and it's wrong. It's totally wrong. God is not only oneness. God is one because God is everything. God is a single whole, fullness, completeness, abstract, total, transcendental, limitless, unbound by spatial separations thing. This huge, infinite, overlapping, shared thing. But because God is omnipresent, and because all of God is in every part of God, that means that every part of God shares everything with all of the rest. God is everywhere. Everywhere you look, God is. And that means sharing is a fundamental requirement of God. In order for God to be transcendental of space, in order for God to have a system based on and rather than not, in order for God to be whole, in order for God to be omnipresent and for him to be fully present everywhere, he has to have a fundamental nature of sharing. What's over here has to be shared with what's over here. And that's not compatible with this model of boxes and thinking in terms of either this or that, or it must be this and it can't be that, and it's this, not that. That whole mindset is wrong. The sharing nature of God, the transcendental nature of God, is the foundation of and the premise of that God must share himself. He must share the parts over here with the parts over here. All of God must be shared internally with all of the expanse of God. All of God has to be everywhere. So the only way to make that possible is for God to share infinitely and fully every part of himself. Course in Miracles says God did not will to be alone. Nothing real can be increased except by sharing. If God was just a oneness, God cannot share. If God is just a oneness, God cannot increase. God cannot create. God cannot add anything. God cannot share anything. It's just this idea that God is just this. God is, and there is nothing else, and God is not a creator, and God is not a cause, and God has no power to add anything to himself. That is not the model of A Course in Miracles. If you believe that that's the way God is, you're not listening to A Course in Miracles, and you're projecting some other model onto it. A Course in Miracles, the book, is very explicitly and specifically a theology or metaphysical theory in support of the idea that God is a cause, has a power, that his will can do anything. He is unlimited, and he fundamentally has a mind that shares, and he does not will to be isolated in a box. He does not will to be alone. He doesn't will to be separate. He doesn't will to be the only thing that there is. God's fundamental nature is not that he lives in a box. It's that he lives in an unlimited way. And because of that, because God is causal, he must have effects. He must have creations. He must have a son. So God absolutely has a son. And the Son of God is all over A Course in Miracles. So you really can't take A Course in Miracles and believe it unless you're willing to accept that God has a son, that God is a creator. To look at A Course in Miracles without God being a creator is extremely narrow. It's like saying, I'm going to keep my model of separateness. I'm going to keep my boxes. I'm going to keep the rules of how boxes interact with each other, how they don't. I'm going to keep putting things in boxes. But I'm going to get rid of all the boxes and just have God. And I'm going to make sure that I'm focusing only on the one box of God to the exclusion of anything else. That exclusivity is ego. That exclusivity is a separation idea. But people keep thinking of oneness like it's an exclusive thing. Oneness is inclusive. It includes, which means it contains. There are many things in it that are included in it. It isn't a single thing in a single box. It is an inclusive, shared, not alone scenario. And I think a lot of people are really not happy about this. Really not happy about the idea that there's something that we could call separate within God. That reality, ultimate reality, might have some parts to it. This seems to just fuck everybody off all the time. It's like, because of this model, because of this mindset, people are very rigid in their boxing everything in, and they want oneness to be a single box. They want this to be what reality is like. Just God, nothing else. Non-duality, singularity, no parts, no divisions, no creations, no other boxes. Because other boxes, in the attempt to get rid of boxes, you make other boxes a bad thing. And what you really do when you get rid of the other boxes is you just disguise the fact that you're still believing in separation between boxes by getting rid of the other boxes, so that we don't imply that there is a separate box, but there's still a separate box. So what everybody's doing is trying to force God into a single box all by himself, and projecting this idea onto A Course in Miracles to claim that it's in support of this idea, to try to suggest that A Course in Miracles is a non-duality mindset, is a non-duality teaching. It's a teaching that there is only oneness and nothing else. And this is not true. I'll be right back in a second. Don't go away. Okay, so the whole problem that's happening is you've got a lot of models in the world about what reality is like, and you've even got these models from revered gurus and yogis and people that have claimed to be enlightened, even Buddhism, even some of these like Advaita, Vedanta, and all these sort of non-duality teachings, and so many things in this world have come up with a model of reality based on the model of separate boxes, with this idea of this one box, that reality has to be this one big thing, like a big object, like God is a great big object, and he covers everywhere, and that's all there is. But A Course in Miracles isn't saying that God is all there is, exclusively. So the difficult thing is that A Course in Miracles actually says that there is a oneness. God is all there is. There's nothing outside of God, nothing within God that isn't God. And that's part of the story. But A Course in Miracles also says, in thousands of words, that God is a creator. God has a son. God has a sonship. God has created. He has created co-creators. Co-creators have their own creations. God has created the Holy Spirit. There is a Trinity. The Holy Spirit is a permanent creation and will remain even after the separation is over. So it's like A Course in Miracles is saying there is a oneness, there is a singular sort of reality expanse that is all one sort of thing, it's all joined together, it's all shared internally, it's all one, but this oneness is alive, it has a mind, it has thoughts, it loves, it feels, it knows, it thinks, it extends itself, it adds whole beings. It has created a sun, and this sun is holographic because the sun is whole and the sun shares everything with God. And yet the sun is a part of God. And it also says that the sun is not God's equal because God is greater. God is the cause of the sun. The sun is the effect of God. And that means the sun is in a position of having awe of God because God is more expansive. And the Son of God is not able to cause God, but God is able to cause the sun. So they're not the same. They don't have the same role and function. God has created the Holy Spirit. He has a whole other function. And he is a permanent creation, according to A Course in Miracles. He is not a temporary thing. Those who claim that he is temporary are lying and they have not read the Course. Go read what it says. So, A Course in Miracles' version of reality isn't it's all one big thing, but it's not that either. Because it does say that it's all one big thing, but it also says, and it is also many things. And this is where all the red flags go up and everybody swears and everybody's like, fuck that, that's not true. Because now we're getting back into separate boxes. And I was trying to get away from my goddamn separate boxes. I don't want to have a single trace of anything separate in my box. Because if there is anything separate in my box, that is ego, and it is space-time, and it is separation. Not allowed. I only want to have the lack of separation in my box. But A Course in Miracles states, God who encompasses all being nevertheless created separate beings. Deal with it. Because even in the FIP 3rd edition, God created beings. Beings is a plural term. God himself, in reality, truth, permanent truth, created plural things. Heaven is the sum of all God's thoughts, in number infinite. Infinite thoughts, all God's thoughts. God retains the extension of his thought in his mind. So, somehow, A Course in Miracles is trying to get you to abandon the model of either or, the model of separate boxes, is not demonizing manyness, but is trying to get you to see that there's a difference between many separate things and many things that are one. There were many sons of God before the separation from God. The one Son of God did not fragment itself in the separation. There is a horrendous, fucked up version of A Course in Miracles that is very popular and is being taught all over the place, based on God is a one big blob model, where there's a fudging of logic that says that God has a son, but it's not really a son, it's sort of part of God, and therefore it's so one with God that it's not really a separate thing, but it's separate enough that you can point at it and say that's the Son of God. Logically speaking, you cannot claim even a hint of God creating anything without introducing a notion of separateness. People like to do this. They like to just blur the lines and just talk about it in a way as if it's possible. It is not possible, logically speaking. If God can create, then there must be some kind of separateness. If God has a son, there must be some way, some slight difference in reality that allows this to be possible without destroying reality, without inducing ego. So a lot of people do not like the idea that there can be some kind of separateness in oneness. And we've got this stupid model that it has to be all one thing only. And it can't have any parts. And God can't have any sons. And you can't have any creations. And the Holy Spirit can't exist or have been created. And there's no Trinity. And Christ isn't real. This is a bullshit model of A Course in Miracles that's totally wrong. It isn't what the Course says. It is what happens when you take all these nice little boxes and you strip them away and you end up with this nice little single box and you say, that is real, that's reality. As if A Course in Miracles only talks about this, but it doesn't. A Course in Miracles talks about this. It talks about God creating, God causing, God having infinite power, God having a will and a mind, that God does not want to be alone in the box. God did not will to be alone. A Course in Miracles, verbatim. God doesn't want to be by himself. God's nature is to share himself. Nothing real can be increased except by sharing, which means that God shares himself and it causes an increase in the contents of reality. God increases what is within himself by adding sharers of what is already there. Each of those sharers inherits, by cause and effect, everything that God has. Because the only way that they can exist is if they share everything. They cannot add anything new, but they can share what is already there. So God can bring in additional guests to his party and allow them to share in what he has, and they can share it with each other. They share it because of the holographic principle that each one of them, each part of God, contains the whole. So now, time for a new picture. God creates, causes a Son of God, an effect of God, Son of God. See if I can write backwards again. Something like that. Something like that. Okay. God causes a Son. Because God is whole, because God is unlimited, and because God is all there by himself at the beginning, God can only give what he has. He can only extend what he is. There's nothing else to use. God has to give himself when he creates. So he extends himself. He extends his own self fully and wholly because he can only give all of himself. He doesn't give part of himself, he gives fully and completely. If you give something fully and completely, you let it go. You give it freedom. This establishes that the Son of God is entirely independent as a full creation, a second whole. God says, I bless you and I give you and I extend myself and I give you everything that I have, and you are fully whole and complete in yourself. You have everything that I have. You can think like me, you can create like me, you can be like me, created in his image. There is now a second thing in God. This is all inside of God. God has created an effect. This is the sonship. This is Christ. This is the kingdom of God. And this is heaven. And it is hosted inside God's being as a fully created thing, without violating the laws of reality. This is not an ego. This is not a separate box. This is inside of this. This box is in the other box, which is very different to boxes that are separate. The box of the sonship is in God, in his being, inside of God, which allows this to share what is in God. This God is now the host of the party, and his party guests are participating in and sharing in the internal contents of God. This is not outside of God. It is inside of God. And because this sonship shares everything with God, they are in fact one. This one whole is also here. This whole and this whole are united and merged in the same way that the omnipresence works. This holographic part is a whole part. What's this one? These are separate parts. They are partial parts. The grape lacks something that the pear has, and the pear lacks the shape of the banana, and the banana tastes different from the apple. They are only partial objects. They're not wholeness. This does not share with these. So this is partly an apple. This is partly a banana. These are partial objects. They represent limitations and the absence of other things. And quantum physics recently has said that each of these things depends on the existence of the other things in order to have a relative existence. These objects do not fully exist. They are only partially something. Partly whole. They are part of the whole, but they're not the whole. This is duality, partial wholeness, a lack of wholeness. This is not a lack of wholeness. This is a part of God that is also whole simultaneously. It is whole and it is apart. It is apart from God and it is the whole of God. It is a son and it is a part of God. They are one. I and the Father are one, But that does not change the fact that God has caused the creation of this wholeness here. This remains whole while this remains whole. This creation has happened. God is a cause. God has created a sun. The sonship does comprise multiple wholes, multiple whole beings. Each of these is a son of God. Each is a soul. Each of them is a direct creation of God. And yet, at the same time, because each one of these souls is a part of the sonship, it is the whole of the sonship. It is not a partial part, as in duality. It is a whole part. It is the whole. This Son of God is the whole of God. This Son of God is the whole of God. This Son of God is the whole of God. These wholes of God are multiple wholes of God within the whole sonship as the whole sonship, which is also the whole of God. So there is oneness here. There is sharing, there is unity, there is wholeness, there is a singularity in the sense that each of these is in the likeness of God. Each of these is a part of God. Each of these is within the one, is shared by the one within the one as ones. And each of these ones are not confined to their boxes. This Son of God is also that Son of God. And this Son of God is also that Son of God. As A Course in Miracles says, these are brothers. And even though they're individual beings, they are also each other and a part of God. One brother is all brothers. Every mind contains all minds. Such is the truth. This one brother, who must have other brothers that are distinct wholes in order to be a brother still, simultaneously, and is every brother. This one brother is the whole kingdom. The whole kingdom is God. This is A Course in Miracles, and each of these sons causes like God and creates as one together, simultaneously producing creations. This Son creates, and at the same time this Son creates, and this Son creates, and they all create in unison together as many yet one beings / being to produce their own creations. And so God creates a co-created sonship that co-creates to create more creations in a continuous line of creation that is not ending, which means reality contains an infinite number of creations, and it is constantly increasing. Throughout A Course in Miracles, there is just a ton of stuff talking about how the kingdom of God increases. It is not a separate box that just sits there being infinite. It is not a separate box that is only God. It is a box that internally keeps adding to itself. That is what A Course in Miracles says. The problem now that we have is a lot of people don't like this because it seems to hint at separations. It seems to suggest there's many sons. there's many creations. There are many creations. It seems to suggest the Holy Spirit is yet another creation, and now you've got a Trinity. And a lot of people don't like this idea. It's like it's some kind of blasphemy, some kind of, if this is true, reality contains separateness, and that means it's split apart, and that's wrong. It's evil. So they fight tooth and nail to resist the possibility of this, because of that one idea that you're not allowed to have separateness in the oneness. I never said any of this was a separation. Not in the sense of objects, not like my body is separate from your body, because even though this part of the hologram is a part, and is a fully created individual creation of God, this whole being, to be whole and to be therefore a whole autonomous being with its own mind and its own will and its own thought, must also, remember, and must also share all of itself with God, and so has to share God's mind and share God's will and share God's thought. It is a whole being, but it's not excluded from sharing with the rest. In space-time, each of these things is cut off. There's no sharedness there, there's no relationship. They're all imprisoned in their little boxes. The absence of sharing is the whole basis of the separation from God. It just means that we've tried not to share with each other. The restoration of sharing, where you have everything and everybody else has everything, does not require the end of individuality. It does not require a loss of manyness. It does not require you to get rid of each of the sons. It does not require that you call this fragmentation. You can have a family of people who share everything with each other. You can have equals. You can have brothers that are your perfect equal, that you share everything with. So much that you even share your soul with them. Your very self is somehow one with another person. That there's two of you, but there's one of you. This is the fundamental rule of God's reality, as the Course in Miracles teaches it. Let me write this down. That you have one I'm going to be backwards here, and you have two. This is reality. That should really say and one and two. People don't like this part. They don't like this part, so they've decided that this is ego. They've decided this is a separate box. They've decided we've got to get rid of this. You're not allowed to have two of anything in reality. This has been outlawed by the non-duality police. If there's even a hint of more than one something, up go the flags and out come the defenses. Because the whole notion is it's got to be one thing. It's got to be a count of one. This is a count of one and a count of many at the same time. When you remove the one and you only have the many, you have duality. Duality means separate things that do not share. If you take the do not share and you turn it into sharing, separate things that share, that is A Course in Miracles. God creates many seemingly separate things, but at the same time that they are distinct and whole and independent and individual, at the same time as having that full I am me quality, having a soul, being one son of God amongst many brothers, at the same time as that being true, this is also true, that you are the whole and you are the other brothers as well, without undoing the fact that you are an individual. Jesus refers to that as the miraculous nature of the soul. And he refers to it as being so alien to the thinking of the world. It's incredibly unlike how people think, that everybody is rejecting it and thinking that it can't be true and it doesn't make sense and it's not possible and it can't be what oneness is like. There can't be parts and there can't be separations. God can't have many children. There can't be any creations and the Holy Spirit is nothing. See, the problem is, as well, those who believe that this is a model of reality, that the separate boxes, and when you get down to the last box, that's God. Within a model of boxes and separation, God all alone by himself, exclusively in a box, not allowed to share it with anyone, selfish. Those people that want this sort of God is a big object version of oneness, this big expansive one thing, look at A Course in Miracles, which expresses this, a holographic principle of a sharing God who causes and creates and increases himself internally by adding extra sharing beings who are whole beings and who are co-creators, who are created in order to add to the kingdom. The people who want God to be one big blob look at this with a separation-based mind, with an ego way of thinking and dividing things up and being exclusive, either this or that. This can't be that. They can't both be true. Only one of these can be true. They project that. It's like you've got a pair of glasses on, and your glasses are like this, and they fundamentally have separations in the lenses, and everywhere you look you see separateness and exclusion and division and not sharing and no overlap everywhere you look with these glasses on. So they look with these glasses on within this model at this, which is A Course in Miracles, and it causes all kinds of shit to happen. All hell breaks loose, and the Course is distorted to hell as a result. So what happens is, they look here and they say, some of the Course seems to be saying that God has one Son. I like the idea of one. It's a nice number. Seems to be similar to my little one box. But there's some other parts of the Course talking about how God has many sons. God has many sons, knowing them all as one, is what it says. God has many sons, knowing them all as one. That does not mean that by knowing them as one, they stop being many. But if you wear the goggles, if you wear the bullshit goggles, and you look at this, you see separations here. You see nice little boxes around each of these. Let's put a nice little box around it. Let's put another box around this Son of God too. Surely, if we're claiming there are many sons, we're back in the box model. So now, any claim that there is more than one Son must be a sign of separation. It must be an ego thing. Can't have that. Not allowed. So instead, we're going to have a fucking separation, and we're going to put them over here on the other side of the separation, and we're going to call them egos. So now we've taken sons of God, multiple beings, who are one with the whole and are one at the same time as being many, and we've said you're not allowed to have many, and so it must mean that they are separate, and therefore they're on this side of the separation. They must be something in the ego's view. They must be bodies, or they must be egos. And therefore, if there are many sons of God, they must have come about because of the separation. So, when the separation happened, the one Son, which somehow is freaking allowed, even though it's an idea of being separate from God, somehow the one Son went through a cheese grater and split off into many sons. So there was a huge fragmentation of the one Son. This is bullshit. This is a band-aid that comes about because of this way of looking at the world with separate boxes, exclusion, that says this Son of God is not this Son of God. This Son of God does not share anything with this Son of God. Causes this bullshit to happen. A projection of separateness onto a system that is not based on separation causes side effects of horrendous mangling of A Course in Miracles. So now you've got this utterly stupid model where there's a separation, there's only one Son allowed. I'll come back to that in a minute because that's also bullshit. And if there are many, the many have to stay on this side of the line. They're not allowed to be a part of reality. Therefore, all the people in the world are not really separate people. There's only one person, so there's nobody else. Bullshit. All relationships are now bullshit. You are now the only one that is dreaming because you are supposed to be this one Son who has fragmented into many minds and is now, this one Son is dreaming of being many minds. The Course in Miracles says God created many minds. So that is a bunch of crap. the notion that it's okay for God to have created one son, but not two, is completely arbitrary. Which means it's no different, really, than saying God made 5 sons or God made 10 sons. It's just a number. Why is it okay that God can produce anything to cause there to be one son? So you can't have any of this. If God is alone, God in a box, God is one, God is single, God is by himself, God does not create, God has no children, God does not separate, God does not cause, God does not create anything, then he cannot create a son, cannot create one son, yet alone two. It is not better and it is not okay to say that God, it's okay for God to have one son but not 2 sons. That's bullshit. There's no difference. If God can somehow produce a son, there's no reason why he can't produce 1,000,000. The logic here is that God is capable of generating an addition of some kind. He can increase himself. He can cause an effect. He can make something happen. If that's true, there is something distinguishing God from these parts of God, or even from the one Son. If one Son is possible, an infinite number of sons is possible. If there's no logical basis for saying that you can't have many, but you can have one. One Son plus one God is 2. I don't know if people can't count these days, but if God has a son, there are 2. So people will then say, well, it's not really 2 because it's 1. And it's only 1. But it's sort of 2, but it's not 2, it's 1. To blur the line here. In their minds, they're still believing that there is a something, there is an emanation, a radiance, a light, an expression, an effect, something. God has done something other than himself to even have anything, any notion that you'd even call anything a son. Why do we even need to have a son at all if God is alone? There should be no son of God. If the ego's model of separation is true and its projections onto God are true, God does not have a single child. There is no Christ. This is how people just basically kill off most of A Course in Miracles, by projecting these models of oneness onto it and bastardizing it, blinding them to the holographic relationships between the parts, ignoring the possibility that God can cause, can create, can produce, can have effects, and that these effects are so whole and complete and like God that they can also create and cause and have effects, multitudes of beings that are possible according to A Course in Miracles. When you look at it through this lens of separation, even in the form of one box by itself, and I put this one box onto here, I start isolating where there should not be isolations. I'll put this sun in a box and say this sun is separate from this sun. You're not supposed to do that because this sun is not separate from this sun. And yet he is. There are many things and they are one. This is the correct, full, accurate model of reality and of A Course in Miracles, God is one whole with holographic properties, who causes multiple expressions of himself, where each expression contains the whole of himself, and yet are many, because he is unlimited. And so reality actually does contain many, many parts. But at the same time, they are all one. Now, it is basically impossible for anyone to conceive of how you can have simultaneously something being one and two. That there can be two beings who still remain fully created beings, independently whole beings, but that at the same time, somehow, they transcend themselves and are each other, such that there is one, even though there is also two. There is one and there is two. There is God and there are his many sons. There is a trinity, even there are three aspects of reality. So what you get is the people that only want the one box. Look at A Course in Miracles, which presents a picture of one box that has many boxes inside it that all share and overlap their contents in a box-defying way. They focus on the one box and the requirement of this exclusivity in the box, and they project that onto A Course in Miracles. It blinds them, and they only see half of the truth. So now they will pick up on the fact that A Course in Miracles does say God is one, there's nothing other than God, God is, there's nothing outside of God, nothing else within God besides God himself. Yes, it's true. But then because of that exclusion, because of this, God is a single box by himself, this oneness, this bullshit idea of oneness that's being taught by even enlightened masters, bullshit ideas of non-duality. They don't like the aspects of the whole picture that talk about many. So the many sons and the Holy Spirit and the angels and your creations and God having many thoughts and the kingdom of God being a container of many things and you having brothers. Even the notion that you have a real permanent brother requires that you and your brother share the same parent, that God has produced two children, and because the same single parent has produced two children, they are permanently brothers. And therefore brother, the term brother in A Course in Miracles is actually referring to real multitudes of beings in reality that are permanent and will not go away when the ego is gone and will not end when the separation is over. The Holy Spirit will continue to look upon keep the sons of God in the light even after the atonement is done. I'm paraphrasing. But the oneness people don't like these aspects of oneness that seem to suggest there's many parts to it, or that you have real brothers, or somehow how can there be five of us that are all brothers and not suggest separation? Well, if the five brothers are simultaneously one, part of a collective consciousness, where it's not just one consciousness, and it's not just one mind, but it's one mind and many minds, individuals who are also the whole, which is very difficult, practically impossible to conceive of. It's miraculous. This is what miraculousness means. This is the miraculous quality of everything that is in God. Has this miraculous, transcendental, seemingly impossible quality of that the one can be many and one at the same time without breaking any laws. The oneness people don't like the parts, they don't like this suggestion of separation, they don't like the many, the multitudes, God having more than one thought. So they just constantly are stripping away every part of A Course in Miracles, which is half of it, and relegating it to the separation, putting it in the separation box, and saying all these separate things must be part of the separate box. They must be ego. And so brothers becomes a reference to egos in bodies. That is totally fucked. If you view A Course in Miracles as saying that your brother in a body as an ego, that's what a brother is. A separated off self is a brother. It's 100%, 180 degrees backwards from the truth, because that person is actually separate and is not sharing, because being an ego means not sharing. It's selfishness. That selfish person is not being a brother. They're being a stranger because they are separating themselves from sharing with others. The people in the world are not your brothers in that sense. They are egos. But behind those egos there are brothers, and your brothers are actually in heaven. Brothers are a part of the kingdom of God permanently, and you permanently have relationships with many equal beings who create with you. They create your children with you. But if you're into this idea of it has to be one box, you will butcher A Course in Miracles, and you will put on blinders, narrow-mindedness, and you will only want to focus on the parts that seem to validate. Yes, there is a oneness to it. All of it is one thing. It's all God. It does say that. A Course in Miracles does say this. So then you think A Course in Miracles is validating and supporting and proving your belief that God is oneness, to the exclusion of the nasty little messy parts that seem to talk about brothers and sons of God and angels and the Holy Spirit. We don't like those parts, do we? No? Screw that. Don't like these parts because they're messy. Within this model of separate boxes, we want a nice, tidy one box just with God. And these other parts get attacked and separated off and thrown in the trash can by people who want to project a non-duality model onto A Course in Miracles. They want it to not be about many things. They want it to be about a count of one God, one reality, one truth. Nothing else is allowed. They don't want God having children. They don't want God having multiple children. It's even in violation of the idea that there's a Christ. They don't want there to be a Holy Spirit. Okay, and they don't want this idea that there's a Trinity to be a part of A Course in Miracles. There's a whole freaking attack upon this idea that God has created a Trinity, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Yet alone that the Son comprises quadrillions of beings who are creating their own beings, and there are angels. Don't like any of that stuff. That's not for me. I don't believe in that. And therefore they just basically project outside models like non-duality and Buddhism and Advaita and those kinds of I don't have a self, I don't exist, you're not an individual being, you don't have a soul. All these fucking stupid models are not A Course in Miracles. But people keep putting them onto the Course and trying to dissect it and trying to focus on this oneness to the exclusion of the parts in the very same Course that are trying to tell you God has a family. God has created an extraordinary number of beings in reality without violating reality's laws, without it meaning separation from God. Because of those beings, even though they are many, they are still one with God. They are still a part of God. They're in God. They're made of God. They're part of God's being. He is in them. I am forever host to God. Each of those beings inherits everything from God. They are made of God. But they are created. God has actually caused. The oneness is alive. The oneness has a mind and it thinks. The oneness has increased itself. The oneness has actually produced offspring. The oneness has given birth to thoughts that are living beings, just like itself. Reality, ultimate reality, is not just some kind of, it's just energy, it's just God being by himself, it's just one. It is energy, it is God, it is one, but it's not only that. It is not exclusively that. It is also, the law of God is and, it isn't not. It is those things, and it is the creation of many things. If you can't accept that, if you don't want that to be what reality is, you will find some usefulness in the Course because it does speak about oneness principles. It does speak about transcending space-time. It does speak about the world being not real. It does speak about the separation from God and why that was a bad thing. It talks about atonement and the undoing of the separation. But it doesn't stop there, because in A Course in Miracles, fundamentally God is causal. God has created. He's not sitting there idle, alone. This is a course in learning that it's possible, miraculously, for more than one thing to be true at once. This is paralogical reasoning. Both these things are true at once. God is in this box and God is in this box. They are both true. What applies to this applies to this. It is both. This and this is true, not this or this. That is the nature of reality. It's a paralogical, omnipresent, holographic system. It is not a big object blob. It is not the classical, traditional, the way everyone in the world thinks of it. Oneness. One big expanse, it's just one thing, it's just God. It is that, but that's not enough. That's not the whole story. The whole story is that this oneness is a creator. This oneness has a family. This oneness has, in effect, divided itself, while maintaining the lack of division. It has separated itself into discrete entities while continuing to maintain perfect union, allowing the impossible to be possible, where God can have many children without it meaning that there's been a separation. See, separation is very misunderstood. The term separation, in terms of duality, means this does not share anything with that. It is exclusive. It excludes everything else but itself. It is selfish, it is isolated, it's a prison, it's only this and not that. That is duality. That is the separation from God. The separation from God, however, is not the same kind of separation that is in reality between God and his children, where he is able to create a separate being without letting it go entirely to make it excluded from him. He includes that being within his own being, so now you are within God as a separate thing. If you're inside of God still as a separate being, you are not separate from God. You are sharing God. So now you are separate and not excluded. You are separate without the exclusion. You are a being who is whole, but who is still God and still one. And you are everything. That is what A Course in Miracles is trying to get at. It is not non-duality. Non-duality is just the first piece of the puzzle. It's the first description of God, God himself, big self, one thing, gigantic blob. But if you stop there and you deny the second part of the story, which is that because God is all-powerful, because he's unlimited, because God is capable of all possibility, because God does not want to be lonely, because God is causal, because God is a system of sharing, God fundamentally produces children. Fundamentally, part of his nature is to cause creation, and he has done so. And that means reality has contents. There are things in reality. There are separate things in reality that are also not separate. There are many sons of God who are also one Son of God and who are also part of God. There is one Christ who contains and is each Son of God. Every Son of God is Christ and is all of Christ. And yet there are many Christs because there is one Christ. And this sounds ridiculous, doesn't it, when you say, because we in terms of separate thinking, we just can't stop separating things off all the time. So it sounds like nonsense when you say one thing is two, and the one is in two places at once, and two things are one thing, and two brothers are one brother, and one mind contains all the minds, and every single individual mind contains every other mind, and yet is one mind. It's almost like you're trying to do two things at once, because you need to understand there is a separateness and there is a oneness at the same time. That is reality. It's paradoxical. The only way to understand it is with paralogical reasoning. You cannot use the broken, limited, stupid ego model of separateness, either or. You hear people constantly saying, either God has one son or he has many. It can't be both. Why can't it be both? God's law says that's possible. God can have one son and he can have many sons. God has many sons, knowing them all as one. One brother is all brothers. That's what it's saying. Two truths, that there is many and there is one at the same time. Both of them are true simultaneously without it being a contradiction. But people will want to say, well, God can either have one son or he can have many sons. You're not allowed both. No both, because this does not permit both. You're not allowed any overlap here. It's got to stay separate. So when they're saying God must either have one son or have many sons, they are using the ego, they're using separation, they're using separate boxes, they're using space-time logic to think about a system that transcends boxes and permits both of those things to be true at the same time. God has one son, and the one son is many sons. And each of those many sons individually, directly, is a creation of God. God creates this one, God creates this one, God creates this one, and at the same time, all of them are one simultaneous instant creation. That is A Course in Miracles. If you don't like that model, then maybe A Course in Miracles is not really the proper fit for you, because there are other models where you can just ignore the creation, you can ignore the kingdom, you can pretend there's no Holy Spirit, and you can kill off the souls and relegate the sonship to the ego and say that the Son of God has fragmented himself into many pieces. That is a bullshit model. That is not A Course in Miracles. That is what you get when you don't think properly. That is what you get from earthly logic. Earthly logic says that God is one and cannot have any children. It is false. Non-duality claims are false. All of these Eastern gurus and yogis and even Buddhism and even Buddha and the various things that you hear coming out of people's mouths who claim to have experienced the oneness, are in the oneness, who have somehow destroyed their sense of self, even though God gave them a self that is permanent and is a whole individual self and has relationships with brothers because there are other selves. You're not supposed to be getting rid of yourself. You're supposed to be realizing that you are also others. You're not just you. You are one whole being who is also the whole of the creation. You are one part of creation and you are the whole of creation. You are one brother and you are all brothers. You are not exclusive. You are inclusive of everyone, but you're still you. And so all these models that end up with the destruction of yourself in an attempt to force oneness and exclude manyness are self-destructive. They are not spiritual. They are not A Course in Miracles. These non-duality ideas of trying to not have a self is utterly shit. It's bullshit. God, I'm still as God created me. You are still as God created you. We are brothers. That's the end of it. You are supposed to get rid of the ego, not yourself. You don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You have a soul. Okay, and a lot of the soul, 160 odd soul references were chopped out of A Course in Miracles by persons who wanted A Course in Miracles to be non-dual, wanted to focus on the oneness, and wanted to get rid of all trace of God having many sons, and who later went on to teach people the popular model that God's one son separated from God and fragmented into many. There's one dreamer, one waker, one atonement, and therefore there are no many sons of God, and you don't have a self, and there's only God. That is the bullshit model of A Course in Miracles. You should drop it right now. Go and read the freaking course for yourself, and hopefully you can see it's saying something completely different. There's more to it than that. There's more to God than just God. There's more to you than just you. God who encompasses all being, nevertheless, which now cancels non-duality, God who encompasses all being, nevertheless, in spite of your protests, in spite of you wanting it not to be true, created separate beings. That is the text. God who encompasses all being created beings. Plural. That is FIP 3rd edition. Okay, the edited 3rd edition says God created beings. Plural beings. So if you want to be learning A Course in Miracles, you have to open up to the idea that God has a family way beyond himself. It's not just God. It's all God, yes. It's all one, yes. And it is many. It is children. It is co-creators. It's the Holy Spirit. That's A Course in Miracles. It is not non-dual. It is partly non-dual. It is not a teaching of just oneness. It's a teaching of oneness and creation. Okay? It's not the idea that there's only one big blob. It's that there's this one big blob who has caused himself to have a family of blobs who are perfectly equipped to create more blobs. And where each of those blobs shares everything with all blobs. It's a big blob party. A Course in Miracles, it's not these other teachings. Oneness is not just oneness. The one Son of God did not fragment and the separation. God had already created many beings before the separation from God. Before the loss of sharing, there were many beings that shared everything and were one. They were one and they were many without losing their oneness and without losing their manyness. That is miraculous. That is what Jesus says. In the separation, they tried to isolate themselves and stop sharing, didn't want to be part of the one, so they wanted to be just separate parts. Unwhole parts instead of whole parts. They wanted to, of course, as the ego thinks of this as parts without the relationships that imply being. They wanted to be separate chunks that didn't connect with the rest, orphaned off, alone, separate, alone beings, the separated ones. And the atonement reunites you with the sonship. It lets you open up to sharing yourself with others. Having relationship is the restoration of communication. It is you returning to the family of God. As Jesus says in the Course, ultimately every member of the family of God, which is more than one, must return. All of us that are, I am me, you are you, we are two brothers who each have created our own egos. Get rid of the egos. Don't get rid of yourself. Don't destroy your soul. Just purify it, get rid of the ego. Return to being one self instead of two selves. Be the self that God created and share yourself with the whole. That is the atonement. Atonement is a lesson in sharing. The kingdom of God is your soul. To know the sons of God is to know God. It is a holographic principle. A Course in Miracles is not non-duality. It is non-duality plus duality, effectively, but without the conflict that arises from trying to cause the many things not to share with each other. So awakening is to awaken to the fact that you are the whole, you are the one, there is only one, but at the same time that there are many who share the oneness with you. And it's not the same as just saying there's only one. There is one and two. One equals two. Defies all math, all formulas, all equations. One equals two. In space-time, one does not equal two. They are separated off. I think I'm going to wrap up there. You are this, and you are this, and you are this. You are one soul in the sonship of souls, which is a part of God. You are this. But specifically, you are this. And you share this with this, which is also shared with this, which is why the Holy Spirit is a part of yourself. He is partly you and partly God. We are the kingdom. We, the sons of God. The kingdom of God includes all His children and their creations. See you next time. Bye-bye.